Good afternoon, and welcome to the ARC's monthly self-direction webinar, in which we review important topics to help you successfully self-direct your services. Please note this webinar is being recorded and will be posted on the ARC's website, along with the presentation on our Forms and Resources page under Webinars. Today, we will be reviewing important employee forms, by which we mean the employee change form and the termination and inactivation form. I'm Peter Cook, the Director of Stakeholder Relations. Joining me today are Matt Morgan, Chief Program Officer, and Lee McHarg, the Director of Employer Resources. So we will get started. So our content and goals for this session are to review the employee change form and the termination and inactivation form. We will go over best practices for using and submitting the forms, and we will point out the location of the forms and where you can submit those. First, we will review the employee change form. An employee change form is a form a participant must submit to update an employee's information. Submission of this form is required for the ARC to update the information for the employee. An employee change form is needed in several different cases. If an employee changes their name, mailing address, email, or phone number, if an employee needs a new service code added, and if an employee needs a rate increase or decrease for a service they provide. Please note that maximum rates and rate start dates depend upon the participant's current budget. Both the participant or their authorized representative and the employee must sign the change form when it is submitted, and this can be done electronically. The employee change form can be found under the Employee Forms and Resources section of our Forms and Resources page of our website, which is where you can find all of the ARC's forms and resources. And when a participant submits a change form, they would send the completed form to the FMS employee updates at the arcccr.org general mailbox. Change form processing timelines will depend on the change being requested. For updated contact information, the change will be made within a week of the submission. For the addition of service codes, please allow up to 2 business days for the update to be made. And for updated pay rates, please allow 2 pay periods for the update to be made. Next, we will review some best practices for submitting the change form. Be sure that both the participant and the employee sign the form. The ARC cannot process a form without both signatures. Be sure to include an effective date for the change. The ARC cannot process a form with no effective date. Be sure family of staff is checked if the employee is a family member of a participant. If they are not, no can be checked. Make sure that the code or rate you are modifying is included in your budget. The ARC can't process changes that don't align with the budget, so that's an important thing to remember. If you're adding something, please ensure in advance that you've reviewed the budget and that the budget does include that service. If you're adding a service code, please remember to include the rate that that code should be paid out at. And if the budget includes a service with a 2-to-1 staffing ratio, which does not apply to all participants, you must specify if the service code you're adding is for 1-to-1 or 2-to-1 services. On that same note related to reviewing the budget in advance, if the budget includes some kind of holiday pay, make sure you specify whether the code being added is for paid holiday off or holiday worked. Additionally, you would want to specify whether the holiday service code is for 1.5 or 2 times the normal rate. So again, the participant would want to check their budget to confirm what kind of code they need to be adding or able to add based on what's in the plan. And just as a note for holidays, if an employee is to be paid the regular rate of pay for working on a holiday, they can just use their regular service code. It doesn't have to be a holiday code. In summary, as a best practice, participants should make sure that all necessary information is provided when they submit the form. If a form is submitted missing information that the ARC requires, that will delay processing because we will have to reach back out and request that the update be made. And then the participant would need to resubmit that form, with the updates that were requested, and that would go back to the end of the queue. So that's a very important best practice. Next up, Lee McHarg will go over the employee termination and inactivation form. And I forgot to mention this at the beginning of the presentation, but there is a Q&A option. So if you do have questions, feel free to use the Q&A module to submit those, and we'll do a Q&A at the end of the webinar. We just request that you submit your questions once we finish the presentation, because we may answer the question in advance. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Peter. Next screen, please. So what is an employee termination and inactivation form? An employee termination and inactivation form is submitted by a participant when an employee is going to be inactive for a period not to exceed 18 months, or when the employee has resigned or been terminated. Only the participant needs to sign this form, and electronic signatures are acceptable. Next slide. When is the termination and inactivation form needed? The termination and inactivation form is needed when the employee has requested to be temporarily inactive, or when the employee has been voluntarily or involuntarily terminated. Please note that the form should be submitted immediately upon termination or inactivation. Next slide, please. For involuntary terminations, please provide the issues that led to termination, any prior warnings, documentation of the warnings, dates, times, specific details, if any, and names of any witnesses. Please also include a written statement describing the final incident that led to termination as well, and let us know if you would be interested in being a witness if required for an unemployment hearing. Next slide, please. For voluntary terminations, please provide the reason for resignation, the amount of notice the employee provided, any documented issues leading up to resignation, if applicable, the terms the employee left on, if the employee is eligible for rehire, if you would contest an unemployment claim, and let us know if you would be interested in being a witness, if required, for any unemployment hearings. Next slide, please. Inactivation reasons may include summer months when school is not in session, periods of time when college students are away at school, or months when an employee is out on medical leave. DDA guidance related to inactivation is as follows. Employees can be placed in an inactive status after 6 months of inactivity. Inactivation does not terminate the employee. The inactivation will allow the employee to remain on the employer's roll without having to go through multiple employee application and onboarding processes. The participant may extend the inactivation period of an employee by up to 12 months via written request for a total of 18 months of inactivity. Participants must notify us when they are ready to reactivate their employee, and we are required to confirm that the employee meets the requirements of employment prior to reactivation. Next slide, please. The termination and inactivation form is conveniently located on the Forms and Resources page of our website under the Employee Forms and Resources section. Next slide, please. Participants can submit employee termination and inactivation forms to FMS Employee Relations at the arcccr.org. Next slide. Best practices. Next slide. All forms should be submitted immediately upon inactivation or termination of the employee. All fields on the form should be completed to avoid delays in processing. The ARC requires this detailed information in the event the employee claims unemployment. Now we'll open the floor to questions.
Someone asked, do you need a termination form for a vendor support broker? And I guess the answer would be no, because it's not a vendor relationship. You would just update. If you wanted to change that relationship, you'd change your. Actually, I don't know that you need to do. Well, you don't need to do this form for that. Someone asked, if a participant can't sign a form, they've used a fingerprint in the past. Is that still acceptable on an employee change form?
That is acceptable.
Can a participant require their staff to be drug tested prior to employment?
So a participant will make their own policies and procedures that for their own business. And they would have to be in writing prior to hire, and they would have to apply to all.
They would also need to arrange that themselves. So,
Yeah.
They wouldn't be using an ARC account or something like that. They would need to arrange with a company that could provide that. And then I assume the payment for that would probably come out of a trading line or something like that. So if someone has an employee with no code for holidays or personal days required by Montgomery County, how do I fix this? You would do an employee change form, I believe, to add the different codes that you want. Someone asked if you could add more rows for rate changes. It's difficult to squeeze in changes for 3 different service codes. I think we're currently working on an update to that form. Someone asked, when submitting a change form, do we submit through a ticket or just an email? You would just email that in to the email address listed on the form. That tickets are only for customer service issues, or questions or whatever. Someone said they submitted a change form in January for a rate increase. At the renewal time, there's no changes have been effective. Received notification that any prorate adjustments would have to be approved by DDA. That's just our guidance from DDA, is to send anything that's any retroactive changes through DDA. And DDA hasn't issued. I mean, that's what they've told us, but I don't think there's any formal guidance yet on that for participants. How do you distinguish employees who have PTO and paid holidays? Do you fill this form out every PCP year? No, correct me if I'm wrongly, but once you assign a code to an employee, they'll keep them. It doesn't need to be changed every PCP year. So if you've added PTO or whatever, then they'll still have access to those codes year to year. The only thing you would need to change is if you had a change in services. So if you added, say, CDS and you had only had personal sports before, you would need to add all the codes for CDS to each employee that you wanted to have those codes. Someone asked if the onboarding pack will be updated so there's room for all the changes, like holiday 1.5 time. Yeah, so we're updating that form. I think that's not been updated yet correctly, but we are working on updating that, and we will add lines to that.
Correct.
We're also going to give some examples of the types of services so people don't forget to add them. So we'll send an accompanying list of possible services. Does the rate change for the employee on the effective date or the date that it is approved? It would change on the effective date. But again, if you're requesting an effective date retroactively, then that would need to go through DDA. So if you were to send one in with an effective date of, say, the day you sent it, then that would be processed. Even if it was processed later, that would be retro to the day that it was sent. But if you are requesting more than a retroactive date of more than 7 days prior to the date the form is sent, then it needs to go to DDA. Can employee change form be directly submitted without going through a CCS for transmitting? Lee, you want to take that one?
Yeah, that can be directly submitted to us.
So why do we need to submit change forms to add county or state required workers' rights such as sick and safe leave? That should appear automatically. We're working through that, but part of the thing is an employer can give a more robust package of benefits that sick and safe leave requires, and so then they're not required to give sick and safe leave as well. So if an employer chooses to give PTO that is more generous essentially than the minimum required by law, then they can just do that rather than have the sick and safe leave. And so we're working through how to provide the calculations for people who choose not to give more generous benefits. But I think most people have chosen to give PTO that check the box on that. Someone says about prorated rates, why aren't the new approved budget effective? I'm not sure what the person who sent that question, I need more details. I'm not sure I understand what you're asking about that. I apologize. Someone asked if we accept encrypted email and how do you handle encrypted email? We do accept encrypted email. And we do what we need to do to open them. Most encryption services provide a way for the end user without having downloaded the software to open that through a code or whatever. So we're used to getting those. Where can I find the codes for holidays, personal days, etc.? Again, we'll provide a list of those when we, but even if you were, you'll see them in other employees in the EVI profile or whatever, or you can just, again, we'll provide them. Or you could, if you wrote personal supports, paid holiday or whatever, our team would be able to determine, what the exact code that corresponds to, as long as it's a description that matches. But we'll provide a list of those. When again, we're working on that form, so when that's released, there'll be sort of an addendum to that includes all the codes, so that people are able to put the exact code. And if there's a question, the teams will normally reach out to say that they don't understand something if someone doesn't write in that's not clear. Do vendors need to provide anything similar to an employee change form if their rates are changing? I believe DDA requires a budget modification to change vendor rates is our current guidance. And so that would be approved through the budget modification process, and then our team would have that to put the max rate into the system. Does a new family staff form need to be submitted when a new service code is linked to a family member?
Yes, it does.
Do people give health benefits to direct support employees? Do they have to work full-time hours? I believe both of those are at the discretion of the employer. How many, what the hour requirements are to provide benefits and whether benefits are provided. Someone said, so they're saying that the form was submitted in January, why aren't the new rates effective from the time the form received date and prorate adjustments dates sent to DDA for approval? Yeah, so we are going to go through and process the rate changes effective just to effective the day that the forms were received. And then if DDA does approve a retro, we will go back and do the retro. And so we'll be working through those, but there's a number of those, I believe, waiting at DDA. So we'll be working through those. So at least the base pay rate change will be in there. But potentially not the retro payment. And then those will go back to the rate date effect, the date submitted, sorry. So there will be some retro pay, but to the date submitted, not prior to the date submitted though. I believe, hopefully that answers your question. Someone asked about providing a portal for communication things. For some of the submissions of documents, we do those through a submission through the mileage, for instance, driver's license and insurance information. There's a portal for that. So we can look at doing that through other ones. But again, we encourage people to use encrypted communication to send us documents that contain personal information. I'm going to ask, are health benefits taken out bi-weekly from an employee's retirement account be allowed from authorized reimbursements? So health benefits taken out bi-weekly from an employee's retirement account. I'm thinking you mean like Medicare co-payment or something like that. If it's a specific circumstance like that, you'd have to ask that question of DDA. Our understanding is that we cannot process. So like if an employer, as an example, or if an employee has another job and receives health benefits through that other job, our understanding is we're not supposed to, that an employer in self-directed services cannot pay the employer's or the employee's share of benefits that the employee has to pay to their other job, as an example. And this might be viewed as the same thing. So if there's like if an employee is receiving Medicare and those come out of a retirement payment, then or any other fund like that, then that would be a question for DDA. We would take that to DDA if we got that, because I'm not sure that we are allowed to pay that. If anyone has any other questions, feel free to reach out to stakeholder relations or the appropriate team. But if you put in a ticket, for the appropriate team or just a general ticket for stakeholder relations, they can answer any questions that people have. With that, thank you for joining us, and we look forward to seeing everyone at our next monthly webinar.